podcast is powered by PKF. PKF, your trusted advisor in the Hunter for over 45 years. Down to Business acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters this podcast is recorded on.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Down to Business. I'm your host, Andrew Beattie, and today joining me is Declan Edwards from BU Happiness College, otherwise known as the Happiness Guy. You know, I know Declan, I've known him for that long, but avid basketballer, quite the researcher, both, I guess, not only in his business, but outside of business as well. And you know, for this podcast particularly, you know, the business owners. So welcome, Declan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mate, I've given you a very, summarised is the best probably way, introduction.
Yep.
We're going to go to background, but I'm interested because, we say the Happiness College and it sounds very, touchy-feely and life's wonderful. You know, we've used you, so I know a bit more about what you do. But, I mean, I'm gathering people are probably listening or watching and going, the Happiness Guy, spreading rainbows. But tell me a bit more about not only the business where you've ended up, but the journey you've been on to get to where you are today.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, calling out the idea of what does it even mean to be a happiness researcher and to run a happiness college? I know when I was growing up and going through my schooling, I didn't even know that was possible to do as a job. I didn't know it was a thing. What's been really encouraging, exciting for me to see as I've gone more and more into the field of positive psychology, which is called the science of happiness, so it's understanding what happiness means, is these questions aren't really new. We've been asking since the dawn of mankind what a happy and successful life means. You go back to the Greek philosophers, it was a massive concept that they spoke about all the time. However, it's only been in the last 20 to 30 years that we've put a scientific lens to it to go, well, hang on, we can measure this, we can quantify and track it, and we can take steps to radically improve it, not only on the individual level and making happier people, but on a team and organizational scale. And now we're seeing in countries like Denmark, Switzerland, Bhutan, Canada, and New Zealand have announced they're doing it, focusing on measuring gross national happiness as a metric of success for a whole nation, rather than just betting our country's success on GDP and economic growth.
On that point, sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're good.
I've read something around this and I couldn't agree more, where a lot of people think, if I have this, I'll be successful, or if I get that title, or if I've purchased this, I'll be happy. Yeah. I guess that's exactly the point you're sort of going. It's more of a state of mind and where we position ourselves.
Oh, we've all seen and known, and maybe you're watching this and you are one, people who are remarkably successful in a domain in their life, either in business, in their career, financially, but they are deeply unhappy and unfulfilled. My argument would be that's one of the greatest failures we can have in life, is to be greatly successful and greatly unhappy. So what led me into this field of research is, people look at me as that happiness guy and go, oh, I must have always been happy. But I spent most of my life deeply unhappy and really struggling with knowing who I was, having a good relationship with myself, knowing what a happy, successful life meant to me. And what that led to was a realization that a lot of the skills associated with happiness, things like self-worth and self-esteem, things like resilience, things like emotional intelligence, I hadn't been exposed to any of those growing up. I knew nothing about them. And I started coming across these great mentors and coaches, and I kept asking them, how do you guys know all this? It's like you've got a cheat sheet for making better decisions and living a better life. Where'd you get this toolkit from? And they kept mentioning this field of positive psychology, of going, well, there's this scientific area of research that goes, hey, rather than focusing on what's, quote unquote, I'll put in air quotes, wrong with people and how to fix them or treat them, we need to start focusing on what's right with people and what's right with humanity and how to cultivate that. And it's been really beautiful, obviously, as I've gone through that, not only for my own growth and development, but now having run BU Happiness College for 7 years and helping individuals and organizations better understand and improve their happiness, seeing the impact that has of going, exactly as you said, we used to think, I think a lot of people still do think, that happiness is the outcome of success. When I achieve X, then I'll be happy. What we know from all the research now is the relationship is the exact opposite. When you are happy and fulfilled, and when you have developed those soft skills or human skills, you are so much more likely to make decisions and take actions that will lead you to be successful.
I want to come back to that, but I want to paint the picture for people. So where'd you grow up?
Mate, all over the place. I was born in Orange County, California. Not that you'd pick it with my accent these days. Dad is from England. My mum is from Dungog Patterson region.
Yeah, right.
Dad's
Great part of the world.
Yep, great part. So Dad's a military man. I'm actually the first generation male in a direct lineage for about 4 or 5 generations now to not be military or police force. So very big family history of military or police force. So I moved around all over the place. Ended up calling Newcastle and the Hunter region home I've been here for about 15 or so years now.
Not quite a local.
Not quite a local, getting close, but married a local girl, fell in love here, settled in with the city, and this is home for us now.
Yeah. And upbringing, so just again, for a lot of people could relate, you're saying, I'm also, ironically, from a military family, and I know what it can be like, and it can be tough, but, so pretty standard upbringing, very much blue collar by the sounds of it, that sort of thing, yeah?
Yeah, moved around a lot, had a very high value placed growing up on, ironically, on success. So this value of achievement and if you're going to live a good, happy life, you need to get the good grades in school, you need to get the good career, probably in the military, et cetera, work your way up the chain. And I remember getting to a point where I went, I don't think that's my definition for a happy life, but I don't know what would be if not that. And I think, I've seen through my work, so many people reach these crisis points in their life where they look back on their life and go, I've never lived by my definition of happiness and success. I've pursued my parents, or I've pursued my bosses, or I've pursued societies, but I have no idea what happiness means to me. And so that was my first big moment of I don't even know what I want out of life. I don't even know where I'm going.
It's a great point. I think there'd be a lot of people, business owners or not business owners, that'd be sitting there going, hey, whether they like to admit it or not, I can relate to this. I mean, even we're in business advisory is in our sense, but we even look at goals, which you're doing goals from a totally different perspective. But, people don't have goals generally. So, if they haven't got goals, how do they know what to achieve? You're a bit the same. If you don't know what makes you happy. Yep. How can you actually get there?
Well, yeah, we're shooting at something that we don't understand or see. It's a very blurry target. And it's funny because you mentioned, asking the goal of happiness. It is one of the most profound core human goals. There's been a big study done where they asked people, all different ages, backgrounds, genders, cultures, what's a goal that you have in life? And they could name anything: business, relationship, financial, travel, whatever. They name their goal. You go, yeah, but why that goal? Out of everything you could have chosen, why that? And they go another level deeper. You go, but why that? Go another level. By the time you get 4 or 5 down, it's called 5 whys theory, every single person lands on one of 2 answers. Because I want to be happy, or because I want to be loved. Regardless of our differences in how we go about meeting those, there's this core uniting desire of every human being on the planet to be happy and to live a loving life. And most people have no bloody clue how to get there because they've never worked on the skills of happiness.
Well, and I think back to that point, one of the sayings I always say to my guys, the great one, saying if you haven't got a plan, you'll hit it with amazing accuracy.
Yep.
And it's absolutely true. So let's keep pushing down. So you've obviously then, not gone the family path, and so was it then you went into psychology, or how'd you get to, from that point knowing that's not what I want to do, to where you are now?
Yeah, so I actually initially went to university to study journalism because the 18-year-old me finishing off high school went, I would love to be the host of Getaway. It was I'd love to host a travel show and just, travel the world. And so I went into journalism, and I remember a pretty profound tipping point looking back on it now, connecting the dots, lining up. I'd been writing all these good news stories. And now this was quite a while ago. And I remember one of my lecturers pulling me aside and saying, hey, whilst these feel good, you need to remember in our industry, the saying is, if it bleeds, it leads. The stuff that sells newspapers and gets clicks is negative.
You only have to watch the news of a morning.
Exactly, right? And I remember going, geez, is that what I want to do with my life? Write these gut-wrenching stories all the time and not shine a light on what's good in the world. And so I realized I wanted to help people more. So I went into a Bachelor of Health, originally studying nutrition and dietetics. As I was going through that, I came to see more and more that a lot of people know what to do with their nutrition and with their exercise. They just don't bloody do it, to put it simply, right? We know what to do, we just don't follow through. And I realized the gap was more psychological than knowledge-based.
So that's the coach piece.
100%. And so I went, okay, well, I want to learn more about how to help people make behavior change stick. I want to learn more about coaching. By this point, I'd worked with great coaches and mentors myself all the way through my high school years playing competitive basketball, and then more working with personal coaches who are helping me build emotional intelligence and a better understanding of my values and who I was. And thankfully for me, got a undergrad degree in health and was offered a spot as a postgraduate study in positive psychology through Central Queensland. And
so I want to pick on that for a minute, and I'll keep digressing. Hopefully that doesn't throw you. But mentors, it comes up all the time for successful business people, and I'm a massive fan of both having a mentor and mentoring others. I think often I see too many people go, "Oh, but how do you get a mentor?" And to me, it's like, well, you ask. I mean, to me, it's that simple. Is that your experience?
It is. And having a mentor and coach is something that I think has always felt normal to me because I grew up playing basketball.
Yeah.
So it was just a normal thing. I was like, if I want to get better at the skill of basketball, I work with a great coach. And then I went, okay, well, if I want to get better at, self-worth, if I want to get better at speaking, if I want to get better at running a business, because I went into opening a social enterprise with no idea how to run a business. I went, well, I need to learn from people and ask. My first personal coach, a man by the name of Sebastian Terry, who'd written a book called 100 Things, basically went, here's 100 things I think will make me happier in life. And off he went on the bucket list pursuit. I started my relationship with him literally by just sending him an email saying, hey, your book has made a huge impact in my life. You're the first male role model I've ever had of someone very intentionally living a life by their definition of happiness rather than pursuing someone else's, looping back to what we said before. I don't know if you do this sort of thing, but I'd love to just pick your brain and be around you. And thankfully he said yes. And we've become good friends since.
And I think that's a wonderful thing I like to get across. It's not this, I mean, it might be, if you've never done it before, could be anxious for a lot of people. But my experience, most people want to help.
Yep.
If anything, most people question whether they can help, but want to. So it's a good point. But I come back to your journey. So happiness.
Yes, sir.
I mean, and totally, the points you just explained then are wonderful to hear. But I think there'd be a lot of people sitting there, a lot of business owners particularly who hopefully watch or listen to this podcast. Well, I like to believe they do. But if we look at that, they're probably thinking, well, it's a lot of fluff. A lot of, not real tangible, I guess. But you're going to convince them otherwise. But what do you say to that? Where you sit there and say, well, no, it's not. It's actually actionable.
Yeah. There's a few things I said. And look, I've been talking about workplace happiness since 2019, and I was getting laughed out of rooms. I think the pandemic massively changed people's relationship with their career and with their work, and employers are struggling to catch up to that. There is more and more of a demand now on human capital. I argue if you're watching this and you run a service-based business, your entire business model is your people. Because if you don't have them, you don't have a business. Totally. You're not selling a product, you're selling people, right? It was actually the late and great Tony Hasai, who was the founder and CEO of Zappos, the shoe company. Yep, great book, Delivering Happiness, highly recommend. He made this argument that when we fundamentally can't deliver a great service or product from unhappy employees, and the reason being our priority order as business owners used to be shareholders and stakeholders priority number one. So basically deliver a great bottom line, have good profits and good growth. Customer experience, priority number two. And then third, maybe we'll look at employee experience and how happy and engaged our team are. Well, he argued very successfully, and now all the evidence is coming out from things like The Happiness Advantage, another great book by Sean Aker, but Harvard has a center of happiness research and the impact it has on organizations. He went, what if we flip this on its head and we have really happy, fulfilled, highly engaged, high-performing teams who love their work and do it really well? Well, chances are they're going to deliver a great customer experience. Now, chances are those customers who've had a great experience are going to rave about us. They're going to come back and buy more. They're going to send referrals. Well, hang on, that's going to help the bottom line because we're not replacing all these staff. We're not losing all this money in retention and recruitment. We're getting better customers for cheaper. So we've had the recipe the wrong way around for about 100 years. And it's only been recently that we go, the most competitive and strategic advantage that any organization can have is a highly engaged, fulfilled, and happy workforce. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And if you want to quantify it and put numbers to it, again, the guys over at Harvard, Sean Aker and his team, they've estimated for every dollar that a workplace intentionally invests into improving staff happiness, which we can talk about what staff happiness actually means, but every dollar that goes into that, you should expect about $2.73 in return over 12 months. Now, I'm not a gambling man, but if I was to say, hey, there's a stock on the market at the moment that you can put $1 into and get $2.73 back in 12 months,
Take it. Yeah.
everyone's going to run and invest in the stock. So,
Yeah, I think it's a funny one because, and many people have heard this before, but we exercise.
Yep.
And we know why we've got to do it, etc. Your mindset is no different to it's part of the body, so it's definitely no different to the body.
Yep.
Yet it's neglected all too often. And I guess you've referred to COVID. I'd refer to say, well, it's been longer than that. This whole I guess more awareness around mental health.
Yep.
Like that's been a beast that's been growing for a long, long time. And how does that come into your work?
Yeah, I actually think we're coming to the end of the chapter that we're calling mental health awareness. It's been going for about the last 10 to 20 years. We've been talking more about mental health. We've been more aware of it. I think we're entering a chapter of mental health action, because awareness without action is just, it's cheap. You know what I mean? It's just talking about whoop-de-doo. I think we're now transitioning into, we're recognizing on an individual level, on an organizational level, even on a national level, we can't just be aware of these things. We can't just talk about them. We need to do something about them consistently, right? We need to take really evidence-based strategic actions, not only with mental health. My other gripe sometimes with this is the mental health awareness movement, whilst it's been very valuable, has tended to over-focus on how do we help people go from -10 to neutral, and under-focus on how we help people go from neutral to +10. There is more to life than just getting by and getting back to being okay. We also need to look at how we help people fulfill their potential and flourish. So I'm hoping this next chapter we're entering in the mental health space is we're going to talk more about positive mental health, not just ill mental health. And we're going to look at intentional actions to set people up for success.
I think what it has done well is it's made it more okay
Yes, sir.
to talk about, because, well, you could relate exactly being from a military background. You can talk about this stuff.
Yep.
Whether you're in a bad place or a good place, you still didn't talk about this stuff. So, I mean, if anything, for me, what I've seen in, what is it now? No, I don't look that old, but probably nearly 25 years of career is that has changed massively.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. Your people come first. And if your people are right, the rest of your business will be might be right, but it'll be in a better position to be right.
Yeah.
So I think that aspect has been great. So I guess then what I like is you've taken a different view, because how do we stop it being bastardized? Like the concept of well-being. Everywhere you look, like it's.
So what does it even mean?
Well, that's right. But then I think people get smashed with it so much, especially business owners.
Yes.
There's something coming out all the time, so they go, well, what do I do? And is it just still too hard and I just shut off?
Exactly.
So you've taken a different tack with, and it's a clever marketing point on the happiness, because you get intrigued straight away. But what's your view on that and how you cut through it and what some focus areas should be?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is you've got to break it down. It's the same with any change in business. As soon as it's too complex or ambiguous, it's in the too hard basket. Let's be real. Business owners have 1,000 things on their plate and on their mind. So a big thing I've focused on with my team since 2019, when we've been in the workplace happiness space, is how do we quantify, track, and measure happiness as a KPI? Because then everyone's held accountable. Then it's the classic saying, what you measure, you can manage. And I think a lot of organizations are starting to go, we need to do something with, employee engagement, or with staff well-being, or with, all these different concepts, but there's no unifying core strategy there. So it's almost a bunch of things being thrown at a wall, hoping it sticks. So what we found through my research, and this is what my master's degree has been on, is going, well, what does happiness at work mean? And we found it's built on 5 pillars. One is high well-being, and then there's 7 different types of well-being that we could get into. The second is high engagement, and there's 3 types of that. So is the team engaged in their work? The third is a good culture, and this is where we see things like psychological safety, like diversity, equity, inclusion, like transparency and trust. Our fourth is leadership, and that has almost, I'd argue, the biggest influence over the first 3. And then our 5th is resilience, because we know businesses are going to keep facing changes and challenges. That's never going to end. The pandemic was just the most recent. Next will be AI and machine learning. If we don't change things, climate change is going to have an impact on a lot of industries. So we need a resilient team. And so what we found is, through a diagnostic tool we built, is if we can measure all those 5, we can quantify happiness and go, hey, you've got a problem with staff happiness, but it's specifically within this pillar. So for example, in the helper industries, I call them, so some of our highest burnout industries in Australia, education, social work, allied health, they consistently score really high in staff engagement because people are passionate about what they do there. They believe in the purpose of it. They're really driven to help. They also score consistently low in well-being and in having highly developed leaders. And so instead of going, hey, you don't actually need an engagement strategy for your people right now. You specifically need to look at your well-being strategy or in upskilling your leaders, right, and having better leaders. And that is what will then ripple through to having a higher happiness score overall.
So, whether most people understood what you just said, I think it's proven very quickly that, happiness is the overarching concept.
It's like an umbrella term.
But it's very much evidence-backed.
Yes, sir.
And very actionable.
Yep.
In a sense to get from where you need to be from where you are.
Yep.
So and that's great. I guess as you alluded to, business owners do have a million things going on. And some would be sitting there going, look, I'm just the employee, I can't take responsibility for this, that and the other. I mean, and you've started to allude to that with what it means for, the WIFM, what it is in it for the business owner. Why do business owners need to and should focus on this area?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had a few conversations recently with business owners who are becoming more and more aware of this. And the common theme is, them either going, we don't have the time or we don't have the money. And I went, well, you can't afford to not do this. Like, A, you're already spending the money because you're struggling to attract and retain great staff. So you're already losing the money in lower performance, high turnover, recruitment and replacement, upskilling new staff. Like, you're already spending it. So you might as well spend it intentionally rather than just let it trickle out the back end. Right? And in terms of time, I'm like, people are voting with their feet these days. Every business owner watching this, I'm sure, has become aware of how tough the market is at the moment for finding, attracting, keeping great staff. And compared to pre-pandemic to now, employees' expectations of the role that their workplace has in their overall happiness in life has gone up by about 43%. So they're 43% more likely to expect that the workplace has a positive impact on them. Now, whether that comes in the form of everyone's talking about 4-day work week, flexibility, whatever the strategy is, the underlying thing is people are reconsidering the role that their career has in their life. And they're choosing workplaces based on how they feel they're going to be happy there. I think the estimate at the moment is people will accept a job offer of $15,000 a year less on average than another job offer if the one that's offering a bit less has a proven track record of great culture, great well-being, all those underlying factors we spoke about. Basically, if it's a happy workplace.
Yeah, because I think for, as long as I can remember, probably 15 years at least, a lot of people think it's based on remuneration. Well, remuneration hasn't been top of the 5 key employment.
Like 8 at the moment, or
is it?
Yeah.
I thought it actually increased a bit with COVID, but like a lot of times it's been challenging work and learning and development opportunities and that sort of thing. And now you've got this one creeping in there as well. So it's just another thing that I guess you answer my own question: why should employers focus here? It's where they really can't afford not to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I keep hammering this home, especially if you're running a service-based business. Your people are your business model. There's no other area of business where we go, actually, this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, when workplaces go, our people are our greatest asset. I'm like, well, how much do you invest into keeping your greatest asset your greatest asset? And if the answer is 0, you've got a huge problem. Right? I think Gallup put out the global recommendation to do a rough budget for how much you should be reinvesting into your team and into development and all these things that play into happiness at work is 1% of an employee's annual salary if they're in their first year or if they're casual or part-time, 2% if they're full-time and over a year, 3% if they're in a leadership or management position. Yeah. So you can quickly crunch the numbers and go, okay, we're going to spend roughly 2 to 3% of our annual, pay packet, our annual payroll back into looking after our team.
And that's, I mean, one thing's the stat on that one. The other thing is, I guess, the diversity and the mix of education as well. Yep. I know some businesses that invest a hell of a lot into training, but it's all technical based, yep, or it's all product based, correct, or whatever it may be. Rather than sitting there going, what's the strategy of the business? What's our gaps of our people? What what are we trying to achieve, and actually filling a training or a learning development plan, mentoring, coaching, whatever it may be, to fulfill that.
Yeah, 100%. And especially because if you look at the landscape of the next 10 to 20 years, what skills are the most likely to be disrupted by machine learning and AI? Well, it's the technical skills.
Yep.
Right? It's the distinctly human skills, those soft skills we spoke about earlier, that are going to be the difference between a workforce that is resilient and adaptable and one that's not. And so I'd argue that if you're not getting ahead of it now, you will be dramatically left behind in the next 10 years.
And I guess on that too, it's a lot of people would, you know, I've heard it said, and you would have heard said, but people say, well, you know, what if I train them and they leave? And others say, well, what if they
this is the Richard Branson
you
quote,
don't and they stay?
Yeah,
you know, it's a terrible one, but it's a real one that people need to look at, because you will educate people through this process. You will help them to find themselves, and they might find that, you know what, thank you, and this isn't for me. And that's just part and parcel of it, isn't it?
Yep, 100%. I always say to people, when you choose to go down this route, every organization we partner with to measure and quantify their workplace happiness and to provide their strategic action plans and recommend what they do over the next 12 months, one of the first caveats I give them is I say, hey, by starting this process, you're going to be held accountable not only by us, but by your team, because they know that you're measuring this now. And you're also going to find that it pushes people either way. It's either going to get them really on board, or there's going to be people who exit. And I'd argue that both outcomes are better than sitting in the middle ground and in that grey zone where you've got people, and we see this across the world. What is at the moment, I think globally engagement rates for workplaces are down at about 30% or lower. Like the amount of people who are passively disengaged at work, which means they're not actively there causing problems. They're not headaches. They're just doing the bare minimums and they don't give a damn about their work. Like I'd argue tipping them either way of either let's make them actively disengaged and then they exit themselves, or let's get them on board and really committed to the team. Either option is better than sitting in the middle.
No, it's a very good point. You just started to mention about quantifying.
Yes, sir.
And measuring. You know, probably something doesn't come to mind when you talk measuring happiness. So let's talk practically around that. How you know, because I think it's an important part. I love, you know, I'm an accountant by training. You know, I'm a business advisor. We like to measure and you know, check and relativity.
Yes, sir.
And how do you quantify and measure happiness?
Mate, this has been the last 4 years of my life has been answering that question, has been diving into the literature and the research. So measuring happiness directly is really tricky and really fickle because it's such a subjective experience. It changes so much. There's some tools that you can use, but they're normally based very much on subjective happiness in life in general, not specifically happiness within the workplace context and within the organizational setting. So what we do is we go upstream a little bit and we go, well, what were the 5 pillars that we found led to a happy workplace? Well-being, engagement, culture, leadership, resilience. Well, hang on, all 5 of those you can measure. And there's really good evidence-based measurement tools that you can use. So for example, in ours, when we measure burnout resilience, which is one of the sub-factors of the resilience pillar, we use something called the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory, which is an evidence-based survey and tool that you can use to quantify burnout. When we look at engagement, we use the Utrecht work engagement scale. So we started to go, hang on, there's all this great literature and research. The problem is, and I know this because I'm writing my master's thesis at the moment, no one reads academic literature. And so it's all this great research that's been done over 20 years that's never made the leap from academia into industry implementation.
Yep.
What my team and I did was just bridge that gap. And so where there was evidence-based tools that we could get the rights to, we did so. Where there wasn't, we built ones and then tested them. And what it all comes down to is evidence-based, fully anonymous staff surveys out to the full team. Get it all back, we crunch it, run it through an algorithm that spits it all out, goes, this is what you're doing really well, these are your gaps, and then it gives you that plan to start tracking it. Now, realistically, I'm very open with the organization we partner with. They could do this themselves. It's just going to take them a lot of years of research and time, which is why a lot of them outsource to us because it's cheaper, right, rather than doing it themselves. And because we specialize in it. So rather than going, how do I measure happiness? You go back a step and go, how do I measure really accurately and predictably well-being in my team, engagement, culture, leadership, and resilience? If you can get an accurate measure for all 5 of those, you're so many steps ahead of a lot of businesses.
And as you started to allude to before, the ultimate measures they can start to do is standard KPIs within their business, such as whether it be a profit measure or whether it be a turnover measure or new business, etc.
Correct.
Because more happy people are higher performing.
Yeah, we're actually working with an organization at the moment that's just added into their annual strategic KPIs that all of their executives and directors and board get held accountable to, their overall workplace happiness score. Now added as something they're tracking.
Very good. I guess with all this, it helps, like, you know, many industries, all too often, I hate seeing even in ours, you go, well, they're another accountant, they're a competitor. I go, well, hang on, they don't do anything like we do. Why aren't we allies? I mean, in your space, I'd imagine it's very much about leveraging each other, because you got the people, you know, the mindful athlete and the mindset coach and Ben Crow and all these sort of people that are really maybe not as structured as what you're doing, but the message is one and the same and only helping, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And look, I'll be really open and honest here. Our vision at BU Happiness College is to grow global happiness. We have 6 staff, including myself, and I don't want to run a company of hundreds of staff. I like that lifestyle size business and being, you know, sort of an authority figure in my field. And so if we're going to have any hope of achieving that vision of shaping the happiness of the whole world, we're going to have to do it through partnerships and relationships. There's no way we can do it on our own directly with 6 staff. And so you're exactly right. A big part of what we do, even with that workplace happiness diagnostic tool, is at the end of every report we give an organization, it's not just here's your numbers, good luck. It's here's your numbers and here is your strategic action plans that we recommend you roll out over the next 12 months. First one is low-hanging fruit, quick wins you can do on your own. You just didn't know you needed to do it. Hand it over to your internal head of HR. Second one is more complex and nuanced challenges that you need to address that I don't know how to help you with, but I know someone in the industry who's a specialist in it. Let me put you in touch. And then the third is, if it's in our area of expertise, hey, this is what my team can come and consult on and do staff development on.
That's a good approach. And ultimately, I'd imagine, you know, and knowing some of your stuff, with all of this intent, it's back to your people. It's to become, you know, that term of employer of choice.
Yes, sir.
Which you've already led to. It is a tough market where, you know, cost of, you know, rotating people or transitions, you know, recruitment, retention, employee value propositions. And I guess, you know, as we said with our prior chat around that external image and branding it gives you for attracting relationships in business. So how's that aspect when people start to look through that lens, how much of that one is achieved and how important is that for businesses these days?
Yeah, I think it's never been more important than it is now. From the employee lens of, as I mentioned before, employees are being a lot more intentional and conscious about where they're applying. And B, from a consumer lens, we're seeing more and more people voting with their money of going, I'm going to choose to work with ethical businesses. And so if businesses can't prove that in some way, shape or form, they're really losing a foothold in the market quite quickly. This idea of, you know, conscious capitalism is just growing more and more and gaining more and more traction. And so, yeah, when we did the diagnostic tool a few years ago, one of my teammates, Nate, said, oh, there's all this value for the workplaces that don't score very well. We basically tell them why, we give them all the numbers, we give them accountability, we give them their strategic action plan, basically their people and culture strategy on a silver platter. And I was like, yep. And he goes, but what about the businesses that do perform really well? Like, what do they get out of this other than a pat on the back? And he came to me with the idea of like the Heart Foundation tick, but instead of for good food that's good for your heart, do a tick for good workplaces that we will put our reputation as a college on and say, we will back that this organization is an employer of choice in their field. We'll back that they're a happy workplace. We'll back that they've scored really well in these 5 pillars. And the very first organization that we ever saw gain that accreditation, because I just thought of it as, you know, my background's in research. I was like, that's just going to be a nice thing for them. The very next week, they had a job ad on LinkedIn. And at the bottom of the ad, they said, by the way, we're also proud to be independently assessed and accredited as a happy workplace and an employer of choice. Don't just believe us, though, and take our word for it. Here's a link to the study that was recently done on our organization. And they published the report we gave them. Full transparency. This is what we're doing really well. These are our gaps. This is what we're doing to work on it. I reached out to them after about a month, said, how's it going? Like, we've never had such a high number of high quality people applying.
Yeah, right.
And that was something changed in my mind where I was like, oh, this isn't just a diagnostic tool. This is a branding tool. This is an EVP tool. This is a recruiting tool. I hadn't seen it through that lens until, you know, you put it out to market and people start using it and telling you how they'll use your product. But it was really cool. That's when I started to see the ripple effect of what the impact this could make.
Yep. No, it's good. Very good. And I think it's a key point for getting back to, you know, maybe not just the doubters, but people that are busy going, look, this is something that's got real tangible impact and results on your business.
Yes, sir.
So flipping it now from not only what you do,
Uh-huh.
as I said, you're a business owner. This is a podcast or video series based on business owners.
Mm.
Been in business for a while, 7 years, I think you said.
7 years this April coming up. So yeah,
Congratulations,
Thank
you've lasted this long. Or
Yep.
maybe some people say, well, is it congratulations? But I mean, what are some of the, because you didn't study business.
No.
And I see this a lot of the time where people that are very good at what they do, they go into business, we can do it better, we can have a better lifestyle, we can be happy, and they get far from that.
Yeah.
Business is very hard,
Yep.
What are some of the habits or the rituals you follow and you've had to develop to ensure that you've been in business for this long?
Yeah. So I'd argue that the biggest one for myself has been intentionality around my commitments and boundaries. From day one, we've been fully flexible work environment for myself and our whole team, which is you choose your hours, you choose your location. As long as you're getting your work done, I don't care how you do it. And that's worked really well for us as like a knowledge-based consulting service business. But there's some downsides to that. And the downsides were a lot of creep in terms of projects and working time. It's the classic, like, if you can be on at any time or you can choose your working hours, technically you're kind of always on. And so sometimes there's a benefit of just going, hey, I'm switching off at this time. This year in particular has really tested me to form better habits around that, because I'm in the final stages of publishing my master's thesis. I'm now writing a book manuscript to have a book published next year. We've been setting up the organization ready for me to I'm actually taking a 4.5 month sabbatical as of October. So I'm taking 4.5 months off. So we've built the business to a point where it can run largely without me, but that's been a lot of work. So it's been a really demanding year. And the thing that made it possible for me was getting so structured to the point where I went, okay, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I work with my cohort of people that I work with individually in personal happiness coaching. Fridays, I do my research for my master's thesis. Mondays, I'm working with my team and setting them up for success. Wednesdays, I'm doing consulting. It was that strict that I went, I'm not skewing from that. And that level of structure, Trello, for anyone who's familiar with it, has been an absolute lifesaver for me over the years, particularly this year. I think looking back on our first few years in business, and my first few years in particular, the intentionality and the structure and the boundaries just didn't exist. And they've really made a difference over the last couple of years.
Well, that's right. You get a business like, I've just got to do more, be more, make more.
I'll just do everything at all times.
And it's, I think what structure gives is clarity.
Yes.
And clarity gives confidence.
100%.
So, it's, and I mean, without that, you wouldn't be taking 4.5 months. Well, you might be taking 4.5 months off, but it might turn into a bit more of a permanent holiday.
Well, we tested it in 2018. It's probably the worst time in business I had. We took our first, because we're a college, right? We do spring break each year where we invite members and graduates and partners of ours to go do something challenging in the springtime. So in 2018, we went to Africa to climb Kilimanjaro.
I did in 19.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So hardest thing I've done in my life by far. I've done other mountains, but that one was something else. And we did not set our team up for success whatsoever. There was no systems and structure. There was no clarity. And I went on this trip 3.5 weeks compared to 4.5 months I'm about to take off. And came back and we were losing, we were in the early stages of business, but we were losing about $3 or $4 grand a week. And we were down to our last 15,000 in the company reserves. I was like, oh, we've got a 5-week runway, essentially. We then had to do the biggest speaking tour I've ever done in my life. I think it was 11 cities over something like 2 or 3 weeks, and then go over to the US and do a speaking tour just to drum up more business and get people aware of what we were doing. And it saved the company. But tell you what, from that in 2018 to where we are now is a testament to the structure, the systems, the clarity. It's a testament to the advice we've received going through great business advisors and through great programs. It's a testament to my team and how much our team's really rallied. The last 5 years is the completely different businesses.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. So you're big. You've alluded to it various times during this this chat about relationships as well, and not just relationships in the happiness sense, but relationships in business. How does that play out for you?
Yeah, I think I always use this framework with relationships because it's one of the core things that, interestingly, not only make us successful in business, but make us happier. And we're living in a really interesting time as a species at the moment and as a global society. We're the most connected we've ever been, thanks to technology, but more people than ever are reporting feeling lonely.
Yeah.
And I think that's particularly true in business.
Well, it's like the the amount of people, and I really have a problem with this, the amount of people that are Facebook friends
Yep.
yet wouldn't come up and talk to you in the street.
100%.
100%.
100%.
It's fake.
Yeah, we've got quantity of relationships, but we're lacking quality and depth. And I think that's particularly true in business. Business can be really daunting. It can be really isolating. It can be really scary. One of the best decisions we ever made, and again, it's because coaching and mentoring was so normal to me. Our very first year in operation, we joined an incubator program. And I just want to learn from other business owners. We've been in incubator programs for the first 4 or 5 years of running the business. And then we've got personal advisors now. It's the best thing we could have done. But I think of relationships in a business setting in kind of 3 frameworks. You need relationships with people who are further along the journey than you, who can kind of point out the way and give you some tips. So this is coaches, advisors, specialists, whoever you're bringing in. You then need to have really good relationships with people who are on the journey with you. Now, I say people on the journey with you are your team. They're the ones, if you think of it like climbing a mountain, they're walking alongside you. And then you've got to have really good relationships with people that you're leading and that you're trying to take somewhere. And for us, that's all of our clients and our members and graduates. You know, they chose to believe in us. They chose to be part of our journey. They believed in our vision and they saw that we added something valuable to their life or to their business. And we need to honor that and not take that for granted. And so if you can go, how do I build great relationships with people who can guide me and I can lean on and I can ask questions of? How do I build great relationships with the people who are walking alongside me? And how do I build great relationships with people who have believed in me? It kind of shatters the idea of, I really hate the term self-made success. It doesn't exist. Even if you did an entire business on your own with no staff, at some day someone believed in you enough to give you $1 of their money and a second of their time. You can't be self-made and successful.
Very good way of looking at it. I think the other thing I'd add to those very good points are, you seek out mentors, you seek out advisors, etc. To me, I've always said if I'm going to take advice from someone, I want to make sure they've done it.
Yep.
It's not just the theory. That's the thing. Like again, if you're giving me happiness advice and you're not happy, that's probably the wrong.
100%.
Yeah, like I see in our game all the time. People go, "I want business advice from starting biz, but I've got an accountant," and it's the most misunderstood term. Like an accountant is debits and credits and potentially tax. They're not necessarily how to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very valid point. You said, look, we're sort out people that have trodden the path or a bit further down the journey than us. It's one that a lot of people could learn from.
100%. And that relationship between business advisors and accountants is really powerful. I'd argue it's the same with our own personal growth and development as individuals. I think traditional psychology, counseling and therapy is incredibly valuable and it's done a great service for a lot of people and a great service to the mental health field. But again, its purpose is largely to help people go from -10 to neutral. Whereas you bring in this lens of positive psychology, coaching, that more self-development side, that's how do we go from neutral to +10. They work together really nicely. We've got a lot of members at the college working on themselves who are also seeing a counselor or therapist. We've got a lot of businesses that we consult for who also have a specialist who consults on HR for them, but they're focusing on the technical side of HR. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, too many business owners, and we've had, we've got relationships with HR businesses here, but we've had HR people on this sitting in your seat. And reality is, most business owners would look at HR as hiring and firing.
Yep.
Where there's so much more to HR.
100%.
And I think that's where you can get relationships and say, how do we work together?
Definitely. Yep.
Great point. Biggest mistake and/or learning?
Oh, arrogance. To be honest with you, to be very honest, I started this company when I was 23 years old and fresh out of my first degree at university and doing my undergrad or my postgrad in positive psych. And I thought I knew it all. I went in very cocky and got very humbled in 2018 with that spring break trip to Kilimanjaro. I think the greatest mistake I could make, and the one I'm still mindful of, is thinking I've got all the answers and thinking I've got it all right.
Or thinking that you've made it.
100%, right? It's actually our general manager, Josh, who we headhunted from some other startups and brought him in, really loves this idea of the infinite game, Simon Sinek. He's like been involved in a lot of good organizations, a lot of good startups, and he's like, man, it's just different challenges at each level. If you think there's going to be this magical place you reach where everything is perfect and smooth and everything feels good all the time, you're kidding yourself. It's just different challenges and you learn how to handle challenges better. And I think that's been really humbling and beneficial for me as a business owner to embrace Because the reality of it is, you mentioned it before, a lot of people are great at what they do and great in their craft, and they go into business going, I'll work less and I'll make more and I'll have a great time. And I'm like, how's that going for you? Because for a lot of people, that's not their reality as a business owner.
No, it's not. And I mean, we spoke before about mentors and coaches. So, like a mentor, probably the way I delineate, a mentor's probably got a lot more on their experience they can pass on. But a good coach will ask a lot more questions.
Yep.
And having that person challenge you and be open to being challenged can be that, it can be one question that you'd all of a sudden go, but it can also be a saving grace as well.
Definitely. And I think of coaches as something I've been reminded a lot of in my coaching space is there's a reason in sports the coach isn't allowed to step on the field. It's not the coach's job to get on the field with the players. Exactly as you said, the coach's job is to ask the questions, to challenge them, to hold them accountable, to create the environment for high performance, and then get out of the way, right? And so every time I'm working, whether with individuals or with organizations and teams, that's what we think of as a team is like, how do we ask the right questions, set up the environment conducive for high performance and for breakthroughs and for happiness at the end of the day? And then how do we get out of the way so that they can do it?
Yeah, that's great. In that train of thought, best advice you've been given, if it's different.
Yeah, no, I think the best advice I've been given is kind of the same advice for business and for personal life, to be honest. On the personal side, the best advice I was ever given, I'm so thankful. I mentioned before Sebastian Terry, my first ever mentor. I was 19 years old when I started forming a friendship and a connection with him. And he was the first person who gave me this advice of, you need to get clear on what your blueprint is for a happy life. Not your dad's, not society's, not what you think your partner's going to want you to do, your definition for happiness. And that was a lot of work. And then ironically, a couple of years later, when I'm starting BU Happiness College, I'm going through these incubators. One of our first advisors there, Glenn Carlson, who runs the DENT program in Melbourne and the Key Person of Influence Accelerator. One of his opening things was, you need to define what a successful business looks like to you. Because I was doing what a lot of business owners do. I went in and I was like, I'm going to start the Harvard of soft skills, the Harvard of happiness. I'm going to have thousands of employees around the world. We're going to be the next Apple. He's like, do you actually want that? And I realized I didn't. I didn't want that. I wanted a really good lifestyle business. I didn't want a massive enterprise. But again, if I didn't get clear on what my definition of success was, I would have chased someone else's. So my best advice I can give people, the best advice I've ever received is get crystal clear on your blueprint for a happy and successful life or a happy and successful business.
That is a great way to move into a wrap up, mate. And when we could talk about this all day, I love this topic. And it's a funny one. When I first started in business myself, read everything. I still read everything, but it's funny how it's changed. It used to be all business and successful people and that sort of stuff, and now it's a lot around mindset and shifting thinking and that sort of stuff. And I think it's wonderful for, not personally, but just in business and our community in general, that it is getting a lot of legs. So hopefully the future just keeps making that better and better and better.
Yes, sir.
But some of the key things I think business owners can take away from this, or viewers generally, what it is, positive psychology. And I think the best way to describe that, taking it from neutral to +10 rather than just getting by. It's a wonderful way to look at things. The power of mentors and coaches, don't just keep plodding along, actually seek help, and most people will give help. What mental health's done is made awareness, but we need to put into action. So you as a business owner really need to look and say, well, if I've got better people in their sense of how they feel, we will get better results. Very much it's measurable and quantifiable. I think you referred to every dollar invested. They're saying the first 12 months, $2.73, if I got that right. As you said, that's a pretty good stat or a pretty good gamble to have. The 5 pillars, I like to just to reiterate that: the high well-being, the high engagement, the good culture, leadership, and resilience. And, business owners looking at where they sit there would be a good one to start. Choosing based on happiness. That's what many of the employees or potential employees are doing now. So it's something you can't not take seriously. I think what you said, you really delineated between service businesses and other. So if you're in a service business, like I think every business, people are pretty central, but a service business, absolutely, we need to be looking at this. Training should be tailored, not just technical. We really need to think about what we're investing and thinking about your training plan to what outcomes you're trying to achieve, and then measure the pillars. that really does come back to, not fluff, but real tangible and practical outcomes. And the power, what you said about partnerships and relationships, not only in your business, but then move it into a business sense. I love what you said about setting intentional boundaries and commitments. I mean, we live in a very fast-paced world. Everything's urgent. We need to get more boundaries, say no every now and again. So the structure, which aligns to that, and the power of advisors and mentors, what we already said, but people that probably have trodden that path and actually are talking from a place of experience as opposed to, had an idea. Final point, I think, or final couple of points, go for quality over quantity every day of the week. Don't think you know it all, and make sure, first and foremost, you have your blueprint or architecture of what happiness looks like for you and what success looks like.
Yes, sir.
Mate, I've probably missed a bit, but we covered some.
We covered a lot.
So, mate, that was excellent. Where can people have a look for more?
So best place, connect with me on LinkedIn or any of the other social media platforms, either BU Happiness College or Declan Edwards, or if they go to buhappinesscollege.com, they'll be able to check out our website. There's a bunch of resources and tools there, and they can reach out to talk about their next steps for their happiness journey.
As they say in Kilimanjaro, poly. Mate, thank you for joining us.
Man, I appreciate it. Thank you so
Good luck
much.
with the rest of the business. And until next time, cheers.
Awesome.